What's going on, Much Music? It's Julie Tasheri. I'm so excited to be joined by Sudbury's very own Canadian country star, Andrew Hyatt. His new EP, L is For, is out right now. He's going on tour this summer. So we got lots to talk about, Andrew. But first of all, how are you doing? How's everything been?
I'm good. I'm good. I've just kind of been traveling since the new year, catching up with family. I stayed in Nashville for Christmas. I had a very chill Christmas, just me and the dog. It was great. And then from here, I'm going to head to Toronto, start making another record, a month of writing and then a month and a bit of touring. So it'll be good.
Okay, so your new EP, L is For, is out right now. Just came out on January 5th. It's amazing. Before we talk about the contents of that album, I have to ask you, I know that when you recorded 4 Good Years, you did it mostly in your home studio with your pants off, if I
Yeah.
read that correctly.
Yeah, that's in
But
some degree. Yeah, no. We tracked that record mostly during the lockdowns and COVID. So I put a studio in my basement. I sang everything from there. And then we kind of pieced, like no one was ever in the same room during that record. But yeah, I was rebuilding my voice after a surgery. That was the first record that I had sang on since I had had the surgery. So it was very freeing to not be on a clock in a studio paying money, just set everything up, leave it set up, walk down, no pants, just, with a hoodie and start singing around noon. And if you didn't feel good, then I'd take the dog for a walk or a run and then go to the gym and come back and hit it for another hour. It was a very relaxed way to make a record.
yeah, so how did that differ with your most recent project, L is For?
That record, I went in and sat with a longtime friend and musician, Derek Hoffman. And the goal of these songs was never actually to be released. The goal of them was it was basically therapy for me. They were literally just therapy sessions. I went in and we had written these songs. I was like, I'd like to just have a version of these. And we had talked about what would be best fitting. I said, I think just like a stereo ribbon mic on an acoustic guitar and then just minimal passes vocally and just keep whatever hurts the most. Like we'll leave timing mistakes, we'll leave everything. We just wanted it to really, I wanted to support the content of the music, but it turned out beautiful. And then my label heard them and then they were like, oh, we should put this out. And I was like, hell no, let's not do that. And then, they convinced me that people would connect with them. And yeah, so here we are, records out.
Wow. Okay. I didn't realize that you weren't initially going to put these songs out because it's some of the most raw songwriting in country music right now. It's all based on what you've been through, personal experiences. Tell me a little bit about the feelings that came with releasing it. Like, how ultimately were you talked into this?
The idea of music connecting with people has always kind of been what's driven the bus for me. So when they approached it from that standpoint, they're like, hey man, like you just went through a divorce, like 50% of the population's going through divorce all the time. So they're like, they're like, people are really going to connect with this and it's really vulnerable and it might help people. It might, meet people where they're at. And that's always, if you look back at every like record release that I've ever made, like that's the thing that I say in it. So they kind of packaged my thing and sold it back to me a little bit. I was cool with it. I kind of made peace with the fact that this record was coming out, and 2 or 3 days before the release, I was just in a panic. Like I just felt, I'm like, I've like left this. I've kind of like gotten through this as best as I can for the moment. And now I'm going to tear all these scabs off and just kind of relive all of this and have it exposed to the world. But once it came out, and I got to see that people were connecting and people are just, they feel like, oh, we've lived this. So they feel good about it. I was like, okay, now I'm okay.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about because if the goal was to help people when you release this really personal record, have you heard from people who have really been affected deeply by these songs?
Yeah, it's been the most interacted with record in terms of like I get novels sent to me
Wow.
daily, people being like, hey, like this happened to me, blah, 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 blah. And just saying like, I've listened to this one song or this record on repeat since last Friday. Thank you. And those are the things that you're like, oh, this is why I make music.
Okay, so you wrote these breakup songs to help other people get through a tough time. Can you give me your top 5 breakup songs that helped you get through your divorce?
I don't even know if I can give you
Yeah.
top 5, but like I can give
Yeah.
you my top one. It was Clean Slate. Clean Slate by Donovan Woods is like that song, like every line is just a gut punch in it where you're like, oh man. And then it gets to that hook where you're like, I want to love you with a clean slate. And it's like, oh, that's nice. It's about like falling in love again and kind of leaving all of that in the past,
Yeah. So you wrote or co-wrote every single song on this project, which was a first for you.
Yeah.
Were you inspired by any other works, or was it just raw, like straight your feelings?
Yeah, it was just like straight up. I sat with the first one that we wrote. I sat with Emily Reed. We wrote, I think, 5 times. 4 of the songs ended up on the record, and then I wrote "Oh for One" with a longtime co-writer, Adam Wheeler. But there was just something with Em when we sat down for the first time, and just the way that we communicate. Like, we'd talk for like an hour and a half and have a drink over Zoom, because she was in LA and I was in my basement in Sudbury at the time. And yeah, there was just something magical that happened there. And I don't know, it just worked. Like, I used to write a lot in the past. And then when I hurt my voice, I kind of stepped away from writing, because my goal was just to, fix that. And being in rooms with people who didn't know that that's not what I sounded like
Right.
forever, it gave
Yeah.
me anxiety. But yeah, writing these was it just felt very natural, and it kind of kicked off my writing again. Like, I'm going back in the end of this month to track another 6. And in the last month and a half, I think, or 3.5 months, sorry, I think I've written probably like 35, 40 songs. And it kind of opened the floodgates again for me, which gave me my confidence back.
Tour coming up too with Sean Austin and Tyler Joe Miller in 2024. Tell me a little bit about what we can expect from that show.
All 3 of us love writers rounds very much. Like, if you've ever been to a writers round, it's a little bit more interactive, and like, it's not just like artist new thing, artist new thing, artist new thing. It's like you play, and you kind of share the stage. So I think we're going to try and approach it a little bit more like that. But ideally, I think what we do is we're just going to share a band. The 3 of us are just going to make a set list that include like all of our music and make it work however. And then we're just going to put a bar on stage, and we're just going to trade off and just keep the show going the whole night.
Oh my
I
God.
think that's the plan. Yeah.
That is amazing. Another
Yeah.
exciting show you played recently. You got to play the Bluebird. Tell me a little bit about how that came about, and just where that ranks in terms of bucket list shows for you.
Yeah, that was the craziest like story. So I was put in, I was not put in, but I was booked for a write, and I went in, and when you get into a write, you basically just arrive with these new people you've never met before, and then you
Yeah.
trauma dump for an hour, and then you write
Nice.
about it. So it's a very intimate, personal experience, and it can be really draining. We wrote the song, we got to the end of the day, and Victoria was just like, "Hey, have you ever played the Bluebird?" And I was like, "No." I'm like, "A big bucket list for me, but I just moved here." I kind of went into the whole thing like, I know I'm going to get there. Like, eventually I'm going to play it, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, "Well, why don't you come play it with me on
Oh
Thursday,"
my
or whatever
gosh.
day it was. And I was like, "Are you serious right now?" And it took everything in me not to just like, I just had a bad week, and it's been a hell of a ride this year emotionally. So that was such a big thing. And then I got there and I was so nervous. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to play. I don't know what I'm going to play. There's a song that kind of gave me my career, which was about a breakup with the person that I just went through a breakup with again, that I had written years ago. Yeah, we've kind of done this circular thing for years. Never divorced, just only divorced once, thankfully. Don't recommend it. But I just felt like it was such a full circle moment. I was like, man, I'm back here again. This song gave me my career. I played a showcase years ago. And it just happened to be between 2 like really important showcases at the CCMAs, and there was an hour dead zone. And so everybody ended up at our showcase, played it. It's like how I got my management. It's how I got my PR team. So I felt like it was fitting to take that song that gave me my career and play such like a legendary venue with it, and just put it to bed. Like, I was like, this is probably the last time I'm going to play this song on a stage, and just kind of like retire it and say like, thank you for this career. This is great. It was just such a magical moment. Like, the room was dead silent. There's people crying while I was playing. It was just such an emotional high for me.
You're a tough guy from Northern Ontario. You got the Carhartt vest happening right now.
Some days, yeah.
But you've always been outspoken about mental health and wellness. Your song High Tide last year really exemplified that. And it's not always easy for men to talk about those sorts of things. So I wanted to get your mental health tips for tough guys in 2024 before I let you go.
I really struggled for a long time, especially when I lost my voice. My identity was so tied up in the idea that I was just an artist, or just a songwriter, or just a singer. So when that went away, it kind of really it put me in a place where I was like, well, who am I? And does it matter who I am? And things got pretty dark. But the one thing that really changed, I was doing therapy and we discussed like kind of the turning point for me where things started to get dark. And it was a performance that I had done where I think I missed the pickup into the second verse. I like fudged the words and it was in front of this whole industry thing. And I just really started to like talk negatively about myself and like beat myself up. My therapist said like, okay, let me ask you this. Like, what would you rate that? And I said, well, I would rate that as like a catastrophic failure. She's like, okay, so on 1 to 10, what is it? I'm like, it's a 10. Like that failure in a room full of all these people, like basically like I'm a loser and I screwed up and I'm never going to live that down with all those people. And then she said, okay. She goes, if you were in the audience and your best friend was on stage and they missed the first 2 words of a second verse and recovered, how would you rate that? I was like, I don't know, like a 2. And she goes, then why don't you extend the same grace to yourself that you'll extend to other people? And in that moment, I just was like, I was floored by that. I was like, okay. So in life, that's what I would say. It's just like, extend the grace that you're willing to extend to the people that you love to yourself, because we are not kind to ourselves at all. And it's like that to me was a game changer. I don't know if that helps other people, but that's the thing that kind of lifted me from like the voices in my head and the way that I talk to myself. That's what helped me,
Yeah, you're the only friend you got, I guess, for your whole life. So you got to treat yourself like it. Andrew, I really
Yeah.
appreciate the time today. Everybody, make sure you go check out his new EP, LS4. It's now out on all streaming platforms. Make sure you check out his tour this summer too, 2024 country mixtape going all the way across Canada.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but like back in the day, I did the Coca-Cola covers contest with MuchMusic.
Oh, I
So
didn't realize that. That's awesome.
that was on the year Tyler Shaw won. I think I made it into the top 10. So it's funny because Much has been like such, that actually is the reason I got, one of the reasons actually that I got a record deal is a someone from a label was searching like Canadian male singer, and
Yeah.
like my stuff with Much came up, and then they called me from that, and that, so it's like this weird full circle.
Wow.
Yeah.
So many
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
them. I love when that sort of thing happens.